Welcome, everybody. My name is Jericho, and thanks for tuning in to the third episode of the Angst Podcast. This is a YouTube/podcast series that I've started in an attempt to kind of rant to a large community. The idea behind these videos is that I'm going to pick varying topics. I'm going to do my best to stay on one topic, although if you've ever sat in a room and talked to yourself for X amount of minutes, you understand or can sympathize with the challenge I face in doing that. But episode 3 is kind of a fun episode because I think it's going to lay some groundwork. The topic I'm going to be going over today is the idea behind, I guess you could say, just consciousness. The little narrator inside your head, your self-awareness to the environment around you. And as we go along, I'm hoping to touch on a little bit of free will, because I think that's actually really important to the idea of what consciousness is and what we're experiencing on a day-to-day existence. Where I'd probably like to start is I'm going to go back to language. And I think we all know that we have a little narrator inside our head, a boy, a girl, a genderless voice, whatever it may be. There's something going on. And for the most part, it's you talking to yourself throughout your day, whatever you may be doing, whether it's an action you're taking, maybe you're cutting some food, you're running on a treadmill, you're balancing on a tightrope, you're in the moment, let's say, versus you're maybe doing some planning for the future, you're thinking about a memory from the past, you're stressed out about something that's going to be coming up in the next couple of hours, whatever it may be. For the most part, what you're experiencing is a voice. There's some type of narrator that's going on inside of your head. And for most people, it's going to be their native tongue. It's going to be the language that they were taught when they were growing up, or at least this probably varies for the individual. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but it's probably the language that you're using the most or that you deem primary in your current existence. And I think that's kind of cool, because that means that everybody is having a different narrator. And the idea behind language is that there's a limited subset of words available in general, but also a limited amount of words that I know in my own personal vocabulary. There's no way I'm going to be able to narrate an idea in my head if I don't know what word to use, or at least that would seem difficult. But if I spoke a different language, well, then I'd have a whole different subset of words or ideas, if you want to think of it that way, that I could pick from. I don't have any examples of this. For anybody that doesn't know, I only speak English. I'm not proud of that. I wish I knew another language. I think it would have been easier to do when I was a child. I think it's easier to learn and understand the formula behind speaking when you're a kid. And I think as you age, you get more focused and dialed into your or my English way of doing it. But I think people that have other languages also have different words for different emotions or different thoughts. It may be redundant to provide an example. I don't have one off the top of my head, but let's say I spoke Norwegian. Well, I know there's a word in Norwegian that means a certain emotion in a room, a certain feeling when you're surrounded by friends or family or loved ones, whatever it may be. And it's this feeling of contentment, comfort. I don't know what I can't tell you. I'm not Norwegian. I guess that's kind of the point. It has a different word, but it provides a thought or an idea, or in this case, an emotion that English doesn't, or at least not so shortly that I could do it in my own head. So I think that's kind of cool. We all have this voice. We're all going along and we're presenting ideas to ourselves about what we think about the world around us using the words that we have. A prime example of this not working very well is when you try to describe your emotions to other people. And you have to pick your words out loud and say them in real time in conversation with potentially their judgment or excitement, whatever the context may be. It becomes a lot more difficult. It's easier to rationalize an idea in your own head, get your thoughts around it, but when you need to bring it to life, when you need to put it on paper, or you need to speak it to somebody, it becomes a lot more difficult. To choose the words is somehow more difficult. And that's kind of cool. It means that everybody's thinking their own way and we're trying to get our ideas out in our own way, and we're all having these potentially the same ideas, but it's hard to preach them to other people. If you've ever sat in a calculus class, I know I have, and I've had a miscommunication with whatever the person at the front of the room is trying to explain to me. They seem to understand it quite clearly, and then they've chosen the words, and then for some reason, my silly monkey brain doesn't understand the words. If we could just read each other's minds, well, potentially, at least in principle, I would just understand that concept right away. I would be reading your mind. Whatever you were understanding, I would understand. But because there's a language barrier and you need to put it on a board and then try to explain it to me. Oh, also, she was super European. Crazy. I mean, no offense, but crazy accent. I didn't even know what she was saying half the time. So now she's not even speaking fluent English. How is my English brain supposed to learn calculus? For anybody that's passed calculus, great for you. I'm very impressed. Math may not be my discipline of choice going forward in my life. I wish, again, I was better at that, but I'm rambling. Kind of where I want to go with this is that voice, since we've established, is mostly you. It's based off of the fact that you were born in whatever year it may be, and you live in whatever country you live in, probably has a major influence on the potential language of that voice, the potential vocabulary of that voice, and henceforth the potential thoughts of that individual. I think most people fully believe their thoughts are their own, that they're in charge 110% of that little voice. And today I want to say that's not true. I want to talk a little bit about your free will and your ability to make your own decisions and be fully in charge of that little voice. I've recently gone around and talked to a lot of my peers, my friends, my family, and kind of just quizzed them on what their opinion of free will is. Do we have it? Is it true? Is it not there at all? And for the most part, a lot of the answers I got was, yeah, I have free will, of course. I make my own decisions. They may not always be the best ones, but if I want to do something, I could do it. If I wanted to slap you right now, I could do it. That seems to be the common answer. If that's your answer right now, I want you to do a little experiment with me. Clear your mind for a second, take a deep breath, and quickly think of a city. It can be any city. Say it out loud so you prove it. Okay. Think of another city. Again, quick. Say it out loud, whatever it is. What were those two cities? Those two cities, more than likely, and for most people, are going to be local cities, probably the city you're in, the city you were born in, a city close to you, a city your family member lives in. They're going to be cities that have a relation to probably your country. For the most part, people will probably pick cities within their country domain. And I don't think this surprises anybody, of course. Of course you're going to pick these cities. This is what you know. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you picked a foreign city or a random city. I don't know if that was because you were suspicious of my experiment or you're trying to trick me or make my experiment not work. But whatever it was, for most people, it was probably a local basic city. A lot of people probably didn't say Cairo. If you did, great, good for you. I will go further into this, but a lot of people probably picked something apparently easy for them. Why did that come to your brain? You certainly know more cities than the ones that came to that you said. You obviously were only given two options, and you probably know hundreds, if not thousands of tens of thousands of cities, but you didn't pick any of those. You only picked the two that you needed to pick given the time domain of our conversation. Well, what did that? If you were a computer, if your brain was a computer and you could open up a file and scroll through, that's not what occurred. You had to provide an answer right away. And in theory, that was you coming up with the answer, but maybe not. Something gave you that answer. Something gave you that reaction in real time. Something occurred there. Another example I would want to turn to is the mass murderer Charles Whitman. For anybody that doesn't know, this is a murder case that occurred probably 60 years ago. I don't remember off the top of my head. Essentially what happened was that Charles murdered his mom, he murdered his wife, and then he actually went to the University of Texas campus and went on a killing spree there. It's kind of a sad story. After the incident, there was an autopsy performed on Charles' brain, and they actually found a tumor pressed up against a lobe. So in this scenario, I want you to ask yourself, was Charles Whitman acting fully under free will? Was Charles Whitman capable of free will? And I think a lot of people give him the benefit of the doubt and say no. There was a physical tumor inside of his brain that had influence on the control center that is your consciousness, that is probably the control center of what free will might be. And no, something was having influence on him. That's a really easy example because you can point at exactly what was causing the issue. Something in the brain. Easy. He's obviously messed up. but I don't think people give enough benefit to other factors they have in their lives that may or may not be in the brain, but definitely still have an influence. For anybody that tuned into episode 2 of the Angst Podcast, you know that I'm a little bit passionate about nutrition, health, or at least interested in the field. And in the last couple of years, there's been some major breakthroughs on gut brain and gut flora and the ability to have influence on your emotions or your thoughts, or maybe potentially that narrative inside your head. I think for a lot of people, we don't necessarily eat the best diet. So yeah, we eat some cheeseburgers, we like some pizza, some pasta, some ice cream, some bullshit. We like to eat bullshit sometimes. And that's okay because it makes us feel good and it tastes good, and every once in a while that's no problem. But for your gut flora, the more and more it happens, depending on what else you're giving it and how often you're cleaning it out, for lack of a better term, or how often you're potentially giving it the nutrients it does need, it may start to struggle. And if your gut flora struggles, if your gut brain struggles, what influence on your emotion and on your thoughts is that going to have? I think a base nutrition idea that people can look at is that everything we eat comes from the sun. Everything we eat, in a way, should be living. If you eat a plant, it absorbs probably sunlight, and it takes that and converts it to glucose and sugars and food and life. And then you eat that. If you take an animal, it's eaten plants and vegetables and things that grow from this earth and absorbs sunlight and gone through all those processes. It eats those things. Its digestive tract takes in that information, that energy, and then you eat that animal. It's all the same thing. You're all absorbing the energy that's from the planet, from the stars. And I know that sounds hippy-dippy, but it's the truth. It's how nutrition comes around. And when we eat things that don't come from the earth or don't absorb that sun energy, it's usually not as good for you. Things like refined sugars, processed foods, packaged bullshit, whatever it may be. And sorry for rambling off on the nutrition topic again, but those things make up you. Let's not forget that you're all of those things. Everything you eat makes up the cells in your body, the cells in your brain, and the ability potentially to make decisions. If you don't have a healthy diet, if you're made up of not a lot of vegetables, mostly processed foods, refined sugars, animals that were maybe pumped full of hormones or bullshit themselves, you're eating those things that ate cheap food that was maybe not exposed to direct sunlight, it was grown in labs, farms. I know I'm sounding like a awful hippie, guys. I know. But maybe if you don't have the best diet, it does have an ability to influence your system. And if it's making up the cells that influence your brain, how different is it from a tumor? Here's another quick example for you guys, if you're not liking the nutrition talk. What about stress? We know that stress in your days releases chemicals inside your brain, again, the center that controls your consciousness and your ideas and your emotions. It releases, oh man, I'm totally going to blank right now. Is it serotonin? Cortisol is the word. It releases things like cortisols, or things that are stressors on the body. It creates an inflammatory response all over the place because it goes into defense mode. If you have constant stress in your life, if you are constantly bombarded all of the time by things that stress you out, circumstances you're uncomfortable with, it, anxieties that you have, whatever it may be, if all day those act on your system, how much different is it than a tumor? If you're the perfect, healthy, greatest individual, completely in charge of your thoughts, if you're zen, and if you've figured out somehow to be completely in charge of the information that goes into your brain, that's great. Awesome. But I think that there's a lot of external factors that have an influence and can really change the way that your brain's going to work, the ideas that can come in, whether it's your geography, your nutrition, your environment, your family, whatever it may be. I think there's a lot of factors that come into play. Let me leave you guys with one last example. I am not a meditator. I've tried. I think it's a beneficial skill to be able to calm and relax and de-stress. I'm very jealous of those people, and it's something I'm practicing. I think that's why it's called a practice. But for anybody that hasn't tried, let me just explain how the first couple of steps go. Most articles or journals or religions or whatever it may be talk about the breath. What we're going to do is we're going to sit, we're going to turn off other thoughts, and we're going to focus on the feeling of inhaling and exhaling. That and then you slow it down and you relax. You tune out of everything else. Try it for me. Start a clock, 10 minutes. Just see how you do. Your brain is going to constantly come up with new topics to distract you. All of the time, your brain is going to be saying, hey, what about this? Worry about this. Think about this. I wonder what this meant. Earlier in my day, she said this, then this happened. It's crazy how you're constantly processing and your little narrator inside of your head is constantly going. Well, if you still think that you have complete control and complete free will of all of your thoughts, turn off the voice for 10 minutes right now. You're in charge. It's your narrator. You're the one. Choose not to speak and see how difficult it becomes. For me personally, I have memories that come up from 2-3 years ago that have no relevancy in my life on May 11th, 2017. I don't need to remember them. I'm sitting in a room, potentially in a dim room, breathing, trying to shut my brain off. Yet the narrator keeps talking. Is that me? Because I'd like him to shut up. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope that wasn't that long of a ramble and that some of you actually made it to the end of this one. That was kind of a tough topic, and I know I missed so much information that I want to go over. So leave it in the comments if you think that I forgot something or if something really didn't make sense. Again, I probably just missed it or didn't complete an idea, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. We'll see you next time.